everyone's time. And Srinidhi, over to you.
Kurma, just wondering if Partho, if he's here, if he could just turn on his video.
Purnima, I'm in my basement now. This is the work area that we have finally agreed to. So this would be my workplace. You didn't come and see this one.
Tonight, basement is amenable to thinking, working, and writing. See that.
So thank you everyone for joining us today on this knowledge webinar, which is a part of our Delta ACE initiative, where we will be discussing the opportunities and potential for data in the urban governance landscape. We are joined today by our 4 esteemed panelists who are all stalwarts in their individual capacity. It will be my pleasure to introduce them all to you. Our first panelist for the day is Professor O.P. Mathur, currently a senior fellow at the Global Cities Institute at the University of Toronto. He was the former director of the National Institute of Urban Affairs from 1984 to 1992 and a distinguished professor from 2011 to 2014. Professor Mathur has been associated with the UNDP, serving as a member on the UNDP Urban Management Program and the UN Habitats Advisory Group of Experts on Decentralization. He was a member of the former Prime Minister's National Review Committee on the Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission and a member of the advisory panel at the McKinsey Institute in India. Thank you for joining us, sir, today. Honored to have you in our midst.
Thank you.
Our second panelist for the day is Mr. Robert Hermans. He is the director of CBS, Department of Development of Urban Data Centers and Regional Data Alliances in the Netherlands. He has over 30 years of experience working in areas of policy, research, and management across various levels of governance in the Netherlands and over 50 countries worldwide. In his current role, Robert is responsible for organizing support to cities, rural municipalities, and regional governments in becoming smart cities or smart villages, that is, becoming more data-driven and evidence-based. It's a pleasure to have you with us today, Robert. Thank you for joining.
You're welcome.
Our third panelist is Ms. Anita Kane, India's first city data officer for the Pune Municipal Corporation, deputed by Tata Trusts and TCS. She's currently a senior advisor for the Pune Knowledge Cluster, a project of the principal scientific advisor to the Government of India. Anita has over 30 years of experience in the IT industry and was formerly a principal consultant with TCS. As the CDO for Pune, Anita was responsible for nurturing and maturing the open data program for Pune Municipal Corporation and established the Pune City Data Alliance on a strong footing ahead of any other Indian city. She's been successful in adding 400 plus data sets in the open domain and engaging with academia and industry experts to undertake research projects in database decision support on the city's civic problems. It's a privilege to have you with us today, Anita. Our fourth panelist for this afternoon is Dr. Partho Mukhopadhyay, currently a senior fellow at the Center for Policy Research, New Delhi, which he joined in the year 2006. He's a founding member at the Infrastructure Development Finance Company, IDFC, focusing on private participation in infrastructure. In previous positions, he has been with the World Bank in Washington and Export-Import Bank of India. Dr. Partho has also been a faculty member across IIM Ahmedabad, XLRI Jamshedpur, and the School of Architecture and Planning, New Delhi. He is a member on multiple national level government committees and writes extensively for the national media. Thank you for joining us today. The session moderator for the day will be Dr. Purnima Dore, who heads the data-driven governance portfolio at Tata Trusts. So without taking up any further time, over to you, Purnima.
Thank you, Srinidhi. It's great to have all of you here with us today. I think this, the current challenge or opportunity, as we may put it, is which cities face, I think is underlined by multiple information sources, multiple things which are happening in the city at any given point in time, multiple layers of administration that come into play depending on which department is acting at that point in time, multiple priorities for the municipal commissioner. And it is in this complex framework that the role of the city data officer becomes very important. And for those who have signed in or dialed in today and are not aware of the background in detail, the city data officers is a position at the city level, which is similar to the CDO position within companies, which is the anchor point for data and information within the organizational construct, which is the municipality. Now, what a CDO needs to do encompasses this whole thing about data. How do you look at information? How do you use it for decision making, making it central to municipal choices? And given the importance of data and technology in today's world, a lot of the planning, budgeting, and those kind of functions are going to have a lot to do with the kind of information that a city emanates. And so today's conversation is in sequence, is a part of the sequence that where we have an ongoing capacity building program in partnership with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. What is good is this, that in India, the identification of this need has happened and administrative framework has got put in place, and we have this position created across all our 100 smart cities. And most of the city data officers have been in this role for a number of months now. And so as part of the capacity building work that we're doing at Tata Trust, along with Mahua with them, this is part of a 6-week program where we are looking at capacities around data, technology, governance. What kind of frameworks do you need to have to be effective in your role? Today's session is a knowledge webinar, which primarily looks at our cohort of cities, but is also open to sector-specific experts and enthusiasts who feel strongly about this and want to do something in the space. And so today we have 4 very eminent panelists, as Srinidhi has already introduced. And so what we will do is we have a very great mix today of policy, academia, and practice in this group here with us. And so without further ado, what we will do is we'll go one by one, and I would request each of the panelists to share their thoughts on some pointers before we have some experiences and some questions. So I'll start with you, Professor Mathur. Now, you have been watching the Indian urban space for so many years, been on so many committees, you've led the National Institute of Urban Affairs, you've also watched what is happening in other countries and been part of many such forums and delegations. And so, would like to start with your experience over these years. What do you see happening, particularly, in the urban data context in India and with respect to, where it stands with the world? And I'd like you to focus on this aspect of indicators, frameworks. These have been some things which in the last few years have become very important. The ease of living index is something all the cities have been working on. The SDG framework is something as a country we've been close to. You have worked on the localization of the SDG framework for India. So if we look at this whole thing about indices, indicators, what do you see happening in the Indian story? And what are important takeaways for the city data officers?
Thank you, Purnima. First of all, delighted to be joining all of you in this webinar. I've been thinking about it for the past 2-3 days as to what all has been done over the years. And what I find is that this importance of data-driven diagnosis, importance of data-driven assessment, importance of data-driven decision-making, all of that has grown in importance immensely over the past 1 to 1.5 decades or so. If you recall, Purnima, you would, I'm sure Anita would too, that when we got on to the JNNURM in 2004-2005, that was the first formal request by the Government of India to all candidate cities that they should prepare a city development plan. Now, that was the first time that, if I recall right, when the Government of India asked those 35 cities to begin with, subsequently expanded to 63, that they should first prepare a city development plan before they put in any request for financial assistance for implementing the NURM projects. It was happening not just here, but also internationally about the same time. A few years later, the UN Habitat, following the fact that poverty was urbanizing, there were calls from countries that slum population was becoming very, very large. They also issued international guidelines for the preparation of local plans, for the preparations of local habitation, urban habitation planning at the local level, at the regional level, at the national level, and also at the international level as to what needs to be done, particularly with respect to what kind of data would really help in designing policies with respect to poverty alleviation and so on. Also about the same time in 2009, 2010, pressure for building up from the World Bank, pressure for building up from other UN organizations, that countries should begin to standardize data. And that is how Purnima would recall very well that the University of Toronto, which was implementing the World Bank project, came up with a publication which was called the Global Cities Indicators, where I think they documented over 100 cities. But the objective was to standardize the data format in order that cities can be compared both nationally as well as internationally. So the importance of data has been growing, and the setting up of the office of the CDO now in 100 smart cities is in a sense continuation of the importance of data at the very, very local level. This is one point that I wanted to make, to simply bring in history, a little bit of history into it. On the NURM, there were 3 principal questions that really determined what kind of a policy, what kind of a database, what kind of data analytical frameworks ought to be in place. Those 3 questions were: where is the city at present? 1, where do we want to go after 5 years and after 10 years? and what kind of a strategic intervention would be necessary in order to achieve the goal that one sets in for 5 years later hence or 10 years hence. And the toolkit that were designed, I do not know whether you have it now, but I will send it on to you. We have those toolkits that were designed with all the data that was required, all the indicators that were necessary, and what kind of analysis needs to be done. This point number one. The second point that I wanted to make before I respond to your question directly, Purnima, is that as I see from the documents that you have prepared for the CDOs, the pressure on the CDOs will come not just from the Smart Cities program, but also from other directions. And to imagine that the data officers will be concerned primarily with the sectors in which Smart Cities sort of focuses on looks to me somewhat limited in nature, because already, and I'll tell you more about this a little later, the pressure from SDG 11 is building up on the state government, and very soon it will begin to fall on cities as to where they are in respect to those 16 major indicators in which the SDG 11 focuses on urban issues. That's one. You would have also noticed, if you have seen the interim report of the 15th Finance Commission, that they have started giving grants directly to cities for dealing with pollution levels. And I think this is one of the questions that has been sent to me in advance for looking at it. So the pressure is building up internationally. What do you do? What are cities doing with respect to SDG 11? To some extent, Paris Agreement on climate change. Pressures are building up from the national level, as well as at national level, the 5 programs that we have on the urban side, not just smart cities, but Amrit, Housing for All, Swachh Bharat, Hriday. All of these will begin to build pressures on the data officers to provide at least some indication as to where our cities heading towards, and also the local priorities. Equally important would be the point in due course of time as the CDOs settle down, the pressures of meeting the obligations which are already defined under the municipal acts. The municipal act also gives, whether it is the 12th schedule of the Constitution or the other responsibilities, I think pressures will amount to those from those quarters as well. So to imagine that data officers will be primarily concerned with the Smart Cities program, I think is too early to sort of to set it on, and pressures will be built on. The third point is really the central one as to which is what your program design shows, which is the data policy. And it is here, I think, we have a lot more spade work to do, a lot more thinking to do as to what kind of a policy would really be very, very useful for cities and CDOs to really adopt. Now, one is the whole scope. And as I mentioned, the scope is not going to be limited to the smart cities, but the scope will be pretty large, and that will expand as you move in. But much more important would be the collaboration with those sectors, those institutions and organizations and governmental players, which are the information which have to be drawn from those in order to really judge or assess the performance on various sectors, whether it is mobility, whether it is waste disposal, whether it is water supply, whether it jobs and so on and so forth. So the cross-sectional coordination would be a very important part of policy. How do we deal with departments which are not a part of the municipalities at this point, but which are the source of information for us to be able to do what we are supposed to be doing? And it's not going to be is going to be one of the bigger challenges that the policy will need to sort of consider. A third would be, I think it does mention your program documents that cities are becoming important. Cities are engines of growth, and they are increasingly over time. They will become more important and would play perhaps a much bigger role in the years to come. Partho will tell you, I don't know whether he's around or not. Partho and myself were working with the Niti Aayog for close to 6 months on helping them define as to how do we take the urban agenda forward, particularly in relation to if India has to achieve $5 trillion economy in another 3-4 years time, or become a middle level country by the year 2035 or 36, what would be the role of cities in that case? What role would they play in helping achieve the macroeconomic goals of the government of India, Niti Aayog? So those questions are already on stream in a sense, and will certainly impinge on the tasks of the CDOs as we move forward. And the last one, which once again is a huge challenge, is a large, very, very large informal sector that we have in our cities, and what kind of a strategy do we put in place in order to get some sense as to how that informal sector is doing. And informal sector is there in almost every sector, whether it's housing, informal housing, whether it's informal transport, whether it's informal trade. You look around and the informal sector, 60-65% of the local urban economy is really informal. And the question is, how do we deal with that? That would be one of the bigger challenges. And the fourth point, before I come to the key questions that have been raised, is, so this is I do understand the anxiety of the government to have CDOs focus in the initial phases on the smart cities program. But I think institutionalizing the office of the CDO is the next step that we should strive for, Purnima. And when I say institutionalize it, what we have seen over the years is that as a program or a project comes to an end, with that also comes to an end many of the initiatives that are taken as a part of that project. In fact, this is what I was discussing with Partho a few minutes ago, that what happens after the Smart Cities program ends? Would the CDOs remain? Or would the institution of CDOs, which was brought in, and a very good innovation, I would imagine, would begin to either subside in importance or lose significance completely. And our suggestion was that we should strive to make it a statutory provision in the Municipal Act that a CDO is part of the machinery with statutory powers, with function defined in the municipal acts, so that the institution becomes a part of the system, rather than seen, and which I imagine some of the data officers might still be feeling that way, that we are an outsider.
That's a very point.
Yeah, it has to come in the statute. We have seen, I mean, look at what the 13th Finance Commission said. Every state should have a property tax board, and they set up the property tax board in order to take advantage of the financial grant. But then no sooner was the period of the 13th Finance Commission was over, the institution of the property tax board was either downgraded or no one paid any attention to this board at all. Now that's the bigger danger, one of the bigger dangers that we often see, and I think it is important that we begin to think about it from now onwards in order to institutionalize this position. Purnima, there are 2 or 3.
Professor, go around the come back for coming from the You?
I'm sorry, Purnima, I missed you.
Yeah, I was saying that what you made a very important point about this institutionalization story, and I think what the thinking seems to be is that while the 100 smart cities have been a place to start, they're clearly not an end in themselves. The idea would be to look at this concept taking root across even the smaller ULBs in India. And I think your suggestion on bringing it into the Municipal Act is a very, very potent one. I'd like to bring in Robert Hermans on this, since the institutional ways in which the Netherlands story has worked. And I think Professor Mathur has outlined the Indian background and the context and where this stands. Robert, this would be a great time if you could come in and share your journey in the Netherlands. What Robert and his team have done has been to institutionalize how data is being looked at in the administrative setup within the Netherlands, how different cities can talk to each other, and what their department looks at is the statistics department, which is very similar to MOSPI in our case in India. And so, Robert, over to you to share some of your experiences. Today, we want to do a mix of what is happening in India and what some of the international experiences have been like. So, over to you, Robert.
Thank you very much, Purnima. Yes, thank you very much at first to invite me for this webinar. Let me first start introducing a little bit the Netherlands and also the position of the Statistical Institute in the Netherlands with regards to supporting our cities and becoming more data-driven. Because, of course, if you see worldwide, this is not something that is being done by a lot of national statistical institutes, to try to support their cities in becoming more data-driven. They started in the Netherlands, and my background, you introduced me already, but my background is I studied urban and rural geography at Amsterdam University, and in the past I have also been working with a large variety of cities directly before I joined the Statistics Netherlands, working with cities in the Netherlands, but also with the cities worldwide, for example, Panama City, but I was also the program director for Smart and Sustainable City for a Chinese city for about 3 years. So I have been around the block, so to say. But okay, coming back to Statistics Netherlands, we are the National Statistical Institute of the Netherlands, and in 2016 we had a new Director General, and the new Director General looked at the Dutch statistics law, and he observed a couple of things. One is he said, well, Statistics Netherlands is working very much from the inside out. We are working from an ivory tower towards society. We produce a large abundance of national data and spread it out to society in a very much incomprehensible way. It's very complicated, it's very difficult. Who in society understands our data? And I'm putting it a little bit black and white because this is also the way he put it back then. And he said it's very important that the data that the National Statistical Institute produces are understandable and usable by all stakeholders in society. So this is why we created a completely new communication and news department, in which the first task was to bring our very complicated data in a very comprehensible, understandable way to society. That's one major transformation that we went through. Another major transformation was like, okay, well, governments are coping with real-time problems. So why do governments and why do statistical institutes try to support the governments with all data? Census data, survey data, also admin data are almost per definition older data. So this is why we created the Center for Big Data Statistics in 2016, because big data is moving towards real-time data, and real-time data is needed to support governments in trying to resolve real-time problems. This also was followed in early 2017, January 2017, in the first United Nations World Data Forum, where at the start of the United World Data Forum, it was said that statistical institutes worldwide need to transform and need to be able to get a grasp and get a grip also on big data in order to be supporting governments on the national level, but also on the local level. National statistical institutes do not, per definition, work with and for cities. And our Director General in 2016 looked at the statistics law and said, it says in the statistics law we work for big government. But big government is not just the national government. It's also the city government, it's also the regional government. So this is when we started in the summer of 2016 with thinking about how can we support, with all the data we have at the national level, how can we support the cities in becoming more data-driven? This is when we created the so-called urban data centers. And the urban data center, the way it started in 2016, was a one-to-one sort of like exclusive relationship between the National Statistical Institute and a city. This is how it started. And this spread all over the country, and we have been working with a large variety of cities all across the country on a variety of topics. One of the topics is exactly similar to what you are working on. We also started working in 2016 with World Council on City Data in Toronto with Patricia McCarney, because some of our cities said, well, we need to measure the progress of our cities on the Sustainable Development Goals. So this is why we need these indicators. We have tried also in collaboration with WCCD to turn this into a national program, which then we didn't succeed in doing that because many of our cities were following other national or international sets of indicators. For example, a very important new development was the United for Smart and Sustainable Cities set of indicators, which was an initiative from the United Nations Economic Commission on Europe and also the Organization of International Economic Relations in Vienna, supported by around 16 UN organizations, following a similar kind of pattern as WCCD did. But this was just one observation, because most of the cities said, well, it's good to have either one or another set of indicators to measure the progress on the SDGs. But what's more important, it's not data for data. You cannot only produce data to have some lists or to have some list of and sets of indicators, but you have to actually use the data as an input, a data-driven input for policymaking. And this was the next step into how we worked in the Netherlands with our cities. We started to change the thinking from, okay, you need to have data, you need to have data sets, you need to have sets of KPIs, you need to have open data, you need to have all different kinds of data, but all those different kinds of data serve a purpose. And the purpose it serves is, and here also we are following the model of the United Nations Statistical Department, better data for better lives. It's not just better data just to have better data. It's not just having better data to institutionalize, which in the Netherlands we also have chief data officers, we have chief information officers. We already started with that already like 4 or 5 years ago, and they were at a certain point criticized in the Dutch society for, okay, well, you are only thinking about accumulating as much data as possible, which is good as a first step, but you have to start from thinking from a different perspective. Why do we need those data? Cities need those data, not only to measure the progress on the SDGs, but more importantly, cities need data as an input to solve all the urban challenges that they have, and that was a really big sort of like game changer, because this also changed the perspective of not only the cities but also us as a National Statistical Institute, because we thought, okay, well, we have a mandate, and the mandate of the National Statistical Institute at a certain moment stopped because we are not allowed to give based on data policy advice, for example. So from the perspective of a city who has actually has to use data to solve all kinds of urban challenges, you need more than just a collaboration between some organizations that are specialized in the production and the usage of data. But you need to thinking from the need of the city. You will also need to create bigger alliances. This is why we changed the concept over time from urban data centers, which was, as I mentioned, a unique collaboration, exclusive collaboration between the statistical institutes and the city, into regional data alliances, because solving an urban problem often crosses the border of a city, so the administrative border of a city. So, which, for example, in the area around Amsterdam, you have the city of Amsterdam, and of course, the city council of Amsterdam is responsible for what happens within the city boundaries of the city of Amsterdam. But the urban issues expand the border of the administrative borders of the city. So this is when the city of Amsterdam created the so-called Amsterdam Metropolitan Region. And please understand that, of course, our city, the size of our cities and the size of our country is a little bit different to India, because the whole size of the Netherlands with 17 million is like, you have some of your urban metropolitan areas are around that number, I would assume. So it's a little bit of a different perspective, of course. But so you cannot stick to trying to solve your urban issues with working just with one municipality. You need to create a regional alliance of governmental institutions on a variety of levels, different cities, a regional government, national government, but, and this is very important to state, not just governmental institutions. So now we are creating regional data alliances also with private institutions, private companies, also with academia, and also with citizen initiatives. So we have been moving from what traditionally already for decades has been called the triple helix approach, like from academia, government, and private sector collaborating, into a quadruple helix approach, also including all kinds of citizen initiatives. So this is where it changed. This is where the most important change was, moving from a supply-driven approach. Okay, we have data. Here is the data. We wish you a lot of good luck with all the data, which is very complicated, very whatever. We produce all kinds of lists. We produce all kinds of KPIs. No, you need to have that. That's the first step. You need to have responsibilities within cities. For example, city data, chief data officers, chief information officers, chief technological officers, whatever. But all of those need to look at these data from the perspective that we have to use the data as an input to solve the urban challenges that you are coping with, in collaboration with private companies, in collaboration with academia, and in collaboration also with citizen initiatives. And this has been the process that we have been going through, and we have been able to sort of like export this experience within the Netherlands to quite a substantial number of countries so far. And the good thing is, is that, of course, the Netherlands is a very highly developed country, but as you may know, part of the kingdom of the Netherlands is in the Dutch Caribbean, the islands of Curaçao, Aruba, Sint Maarten, for example, and this is part of the developing world. So we have sort of like a living laboratory where we can test all the concepts that we have developed in the developed part of the kingdom, also in the less developed part of the kingdom. So in the last year, I've been very much involved in supporting the Curaçao government in the Caribbean in using data as an input for data-driven decision making. And as I mentioned just before we started with this conference, is that in the last month of October, I've been in Bogota, in Colombia, to also support the Colombian government with advice on how you can use and combine national data, big data, center data, all kinds of new data sources with cities in supporting the cities in becoming more data-driven. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Interestingly, when I had met Robert, they were at 2 cities within Netherlands and had started conversations with some of the other countries. And it's great to see how they've expanded their footprint and their work within government and within Netherlands and outside. And this kind of a private-public sector traction is what I think we take to the next panelist with Anita Kane. This kind of thing about having a cities alliance or having various players make the data story happen, because Pune was accessible for some of that when Mr. Kunal Kumar, who was then Municipal Commissioner at Pune, had connected with the Tata Trusts, and together we started crafting this city data officer position. And Anita Kane has been the first city data officer in India. She has had a background in technology, been working as part of the Tata Group with Tata Consultancy Services, and she was the first person who she went through a very rigorous selection process. But she was one of the most enthusiastic people to take on this role, and now this role, which has got institutionalized among so many cities. So, Anita, it would be great if you can share your experiences within Pune and in the Indian context with the larger group.
Thank you, Purnima. So I'm really happy, to have the opportunity to be part of this webinar. And for today, what I have thought is that I will share my story, how I started in the second half of 2017 and where we are today in terms of the data story, and that all revolves around Pune City and Pune Municipal Corporation. So when I started, it was the second half of 2017. So most of 2017 was spent in meeting the heads of the different departments, understanding the processes of the Pune Municipal Corporation. Remember, I came from Tata Consultancy Services and was managing capital markets clients. So, learning about solid waste management, sewage treatment, water supply, everything was new, but I took interest. And I understood how all these processes were run, what were manual, what was automated, semi-automated, etc. And apart from that, I also did a literature survey, especially going through the management report, say, of Forrester, which talked about how the governments were really running their open data programs and how it was benefiting. In addition, I also perused a number of open data portals of some of the cities, includes European Union, Amsterdam City, and many others, Singapore and such, to understand what they were really doing where they were. Pune had, of course, launched their open data portal in the sense of a portal, as in there was a platform available, but there were really negligible number of data sets. So that's where we were. When I met these HODs, etc., there was some easy, quick win data sets I had started gathering. So, for example, each environment officer has to prepare an environment status report. In the context of that, they do collect data, so much data they collect about, the environment, the air quality, the water pollution, etc. So these data sets were available. The health department reports data on a monthly basis to the state. The birth and death records were automated, in the sense there was a digitized platform for the last 17 years. So those statistics were there. All statistics, everything clean and only statistics. All these were available. These were some of the low-hanging fruit which I had collected, in the sense in terms of data sets, and the process had been initiated. Now, when we came to 2018, the question was, how do we engage the broader academia and the citizens? Coming in, I was also a citizen, right? And I could sense that the place to start was academia. And what I started with was engaging with a number of colleges, the University of Pune. So like about a dozen colleges I would have met. It all started with the head of the institution, like the vice chancellor of the Pune University, the director of some institute. So it also included other eminent institutes like Symbiosis, etc. So about a dozen colleges. What was the nature of engagement? Most heads of institutions opened their arms and they said, yes, we are quite happy to collaborate and let us co-create services, or let us, be part of this journey. Well, but then, going down, and then I had to work with the next level, right? So most of them arranged my talks, some of them multiple, sometimes workshops with faculty. So the nature of interaction varied. But what I realized is that, or what I noted, was there were two institutions which had a different response and a very, very proactive response. So I could sense. One was the Department of Statistics, University of Pune, and second was the Symbiosis Institute of Computer Studies. It's very important to, for anything to move forward, for the handshake has to work. So I bring to the table, I can give a lecture on open data and tell you hundreds of stories. I even conducted an audit course on smart cities that's prescribed in engineering colleges, etc. So a lot was done. But something needs to come back. You need to also respond saying that, yeah, we hear you and this is what we can do together. So these were the two institutions which responded. So I'm going to tell you the story about the Department of Statistics in 2018. So very, very interesting journey with them. So in 2018, when I had this workshop with the faculty, so first of all, they themselves said, yes, this was the month of April 2018. The students were about to go on summer vacation. So one of the senior faculty members said, we should not let the summer vacation go by. Let the students start and ideate projects around open data. Let them study the portal and let us engage with them on email. So that's how we started. And when they came back to the college in July, then we had already 6 teams. So totally there were 10 teams, but 6 had progressed substantially in terms of having an outline of their analysis, and you can say an abstract of the way they would like to write a summarize the analysis. So this was very interesting. All interactions were happening on email until then. Then I arranged a number of their meetings with the environment officer for those dealing with environment problems, with the health HOD for those dealing with health problems, like that. So there was a heavy interaction between them, and me and the PMC. And then we had these 5 papers which were actually published in 2018 in various conferences, including IEEE. I mean, what I mean is standard peer-reviewed conferences. So this was a significant milestone in establishing the Data Alliance, because now, this good story, when you take it to another academic institute, they always, they are ready to listen. And for an alliance to work, both parties have to get something. So on the one hand, let me tell you, I'll just give a couple of things about some part of the analysis which was interesting and which was also discussed with the additional municipal commissioner, apart from the health HOD. So when the mortality and disease incidence data was analyzed, remember, we have the birth and death records for 17 to 18 years. So one of the observations which came out as a result of this analysis is that infant mortality among male children is much higher than that of female children. So these were some kind of very interesting analysis, which, as I told you, even the additional municipal commissioner was very much interested. And of course, you know, the pattern across the months in the year, when the births are high, low, so that helps in planning. We all know that the you know, if there are 5,000 births in the city, they are not uniformly distributed across 12 months. This is just to give you a feel for the real. So this was
1 minute. Only one minute to go, and then we move on and come back to you a little later.
Right. So, so taking the same story forward, in 2019, basically, I conceptualized hackathons and, you know, wanted to make it work in the sense of co-creation of services. So a lot of thought had gone into this, what should work, what should not work. And again, it was about what the students could get and what the city could get. So one of the things I figured out is that highly, you know, curated hackathons, in the sense where we define problem statements, where we give a lot of support, where we mentor the students, provide all the data, the tools training, etc., then we did get some output. So if you look at, I just want to talk about this one thing, the school education dashboard, which was developed for use by parents who are seeking admission for their wards in you know, in schools. So they could look at this dashboard, which provided objective information about schools, the student pupil ratio, the even the results, the enrollment, class-wise enrollment, and the, you know, the school results, which are SSC school results, etc. So the reason why I bring it up is that it is based on very good quality data, which comes from the UDICE system. This system is deployed across numerous cities in India, and let's say what Pune has done can actually be replicated across. So it can actually be run as a possibly a service, even a paid service. So in terms of economic advantage. So summarizing, this was, I'd say, end of 2019. There are many more interesting results. As Purnima said, I can talk about it when we come back. But in 2020, what I'm working on is more complex problems like carbon neutrality, etc. How we can approach these with data and in a very concrete manner. So this is where I am right now. Yeah, Purnima.
Thank you so much, Anita. I'd like to say that while working with Anita, my realization has been that there's so much information actually in the city, and to see the kind of energy that has come in from the students community and the interest shown by startups, innovators on what that this information can throw up. Of course, a lot needs to be done from data cleaning, structuring, and all of that point of view. But I think that it can really bring together very different stakeholders into city planning. For me, that felt like a very important, you know, opportunity and a possibility. And on this note, I'll bring in Professor Partho Mukhopadhyay, who has been getting these depths of academic policy practitioner, and to share his thoughts on how, Professor Partho, how do you see the story in the Indian context today, weaving in some of these city-level experiences? We've also done a lot of work on exclusionary urbanization, planning, what it means for the census towns. How are you seeing this, data story, both from a practice and a policy point of view?
It's great to be here. I'm just going to try and make sure that my screen share is visible. If it isn't, then I'll reshare it again.
We're able to see it.
Yeah,
yes, sure. Okay. In which case, yeah, that's fine. I'm going to take about maybe 5 to 7 minutes to basically try and see, since I'm the final panelist, to try and see if we can engage with the wonderful audience that we have. And it's really exciting to see so many cities now following Anita's sort of the tribe that she started sort of grown in some sense. And where can we take this forward? So what I'm going to try and ask is look at the relationship between the city, the data, and the city data officers, right? So the first question that I have is sort of trying to ask as to where exactly as a city data officer do you see yourself? I mean, Professor Mathur raised this question as to whether you see yourself as part of the smart city project or do you see yourself as part of the city? And that's one of the issues that would be interesting for us to discuss this afternoon. And the second thing I would like you to think about, and then sort of maybe we can talk, and you can tell me whether this is a reasonable framework with which to think about how you work, is from where I sit, I see two kinds of ways in which data sort of comes into the city. One is, look at the right-hand side, because since Anita just spoke, and she spoke about this whole use of open data structures, etc. And from what I understood is basically her first task moving into the city was to access whatever data was available in different parts of the city and organize it and make it available to a broader audience, and then see what happens, right? But the second thing is also, and there will be interesting people as long as people realize that the data is there and the city is willing to listen. You might have people sort of starting to use it and engage with it. But you might also need to do what she did next, was essentially facilitate the use of that particular data. What is the protocols of engagement? How does a citizen or a group of citizens or a civil institution outside of government using the data engage with the city? What kind of issues is the city interested in? And the city should also be therefore open to understanding what kind of issues are citizens interested in. And it is that which, and the availability of open data makes that conversation happen on a common platform, because both of you are essentially talking about the same basic numbers, except that you might be looking at how to use those numbers differently. I'm happy to sort of talk about examples in Q&A. But there is also another role that my guess is you often have to fulfill, and that is to respond to what Professor Mathur said at the beginning and what Robert also referred to, which is this whole issue of benchmarking. There is ease of living index, there is ease of doing business index, there is some city quality of life index, there is lots of indices that people sort of seem to be interested in. The government wishes to sort of say that, there's this Swachh Sarvekshan Index, for example, one of the biggest things that sort of has happened in the last few years. And your job is to sort of respond to those demands. And how do you both see those demands? Do you see them as a task and an imposition that simply is to service the senior people, the people who give you money? I mean, not you individually, but the city gets money from the state government, from the central government, and therefore, if they're asking for something, don't ask why they are asking for it, just go ahead and give it. Or do you use that particular understanding to try and understand and engage with them as to what really is the kind of data that you want to look at them? So if you're saying ease of living index, is the data that you are being asked to provide to construct the ease of living index, is that really something that is you feel as somebody who's living in the city, somebody who's dealing with data in the city, do you feel it actually is enhancing the ease of living, right? So that is the question that I would ask you to put together. The second is, when you're measuring data, at what scale and in what forms do you measure it? Do you measure as to, in terms of service levels, what kind of service levels are you measuring? Are you measuring how long water is being supplied on a particular tap or a pipe? Or are you measuring how much water is being actually supplied overall and is being billed? Right? So both those things are different units of consumption. One of them is more relevant to how the citizen is facing his or daily water challenges. The other perhaps may be more relevant for the city in terms of trying to understand how to manage the water system. And finally, the issue is, to what extent is your data linked to the financial parameters, the expenditures, the revenue? How much are you spending on something? How much are you spending on roads? How much are you spending on social welfare? How much are you spending on health? Are you linking the service projects with the expenditures too? Because eventually you would need to look at those parities and back them up with financial allocation, right? So that's the way in which I'm visualizing you as city data officers using data, and I would be very interested to learn as to how exactly you are actually doing it on the ground. And finally, it is not about just the city vis-a-vis the citizen. Especially in India, as Purnima mentioned, we have a city services and government essentially working across different levels. You're responding to national initiatives and benchmarking is one such example, but a common data platform can also help to create constructive conversations across different levels of government. So between the city and the state, between the state and the center, between the center and the city. How are these conversations happening across the space? That's what I would urge you to put together. Let me also flag one specific issue that sort of is carrying on from the smart cities, which is the cities project. And about 12 of you today are basically sort of engaged with this particular program. And I looked at the projects that are being working together right now, and I see 4 broad heads under which these projects are coming through. And I'm asking myself, and therefore you, as to how, what does this say, this focus on public open spaces, on transport, in Visakhapatnam and Chennai on education, Kochi on health, Amravati and Puducherry on neighborhoods. What does this say about what you think is important for your city? Because now that you have been in the smart city program for a long time, these are the kinds of projects that you have put forward, proposed, and have got selected. Right? So what does it say about what you think is important? And secondly, as city data officers in your cities, and I can see that some of you are from the cities listed here, how is data being integrated with the development and engagement of these kinds of projects? These are the kind of structures I put together. Let me finish by quickly giving you a 2-minute example from Delhi. And I know it's a big city. Question is, and I'm sure, I know the city is big, but the example is something which all of you have dealt with in the last 9 months, because it's essentially about Delhi's early COVID management, but not so much the management of the pandemic itself, but the management of the lockdown that immediately happened. So, and all of you would have dealt with this to almost universally, and therefore I thought it would be a common issue that you could all talk about. So first of all, I would like to point out a particular data source. And the data source is essentially called Facebook for Good. It's a data that's available from Facebook, which you can utilize. It's similar to the Google mobility data. What this particular big picture showed us is the immediate impact of the lockdown. And as you can see, the blue line showed how from the 19th of March to the 20th of March, you had this drop in population in urban areas and a rise in population in the rural areas as people left the cities to go back home immediately after the lockdown was announced. And you see the drop in quote unquote user population across different categories, which is the top 8 cities in the first bar, then the other million plus cities, the medium statutory towns, the small towns, then census towns. People left all of these places and went back to the villages, which is the large set of the lake. Right? So you have this mobility data, which then shows you what that lockdown was about. But the question I have for you from there is, this data is available at a 2 kilometer by 2 kilometer grid across the country. Does it make a lot of your projects beforehand, places like Dehradun, Amritsar, were looking at transport for the cities project, and a number of you have used, looked at transport very much as part of your data programs. So can you think of using data like this to help you think about your transport, given what this says about what population mobility is? That's one. The second thing example I want to give you is the notion of a data culture, right? What does it mean for you to have a data culture? And to me, what it means is that when I see a problem, I try and come up with a solution that sort of relies upon data, upon structuring. The problem in Delhi immediately after the lockdown was that a number of people who were in the city, who could not leave the city, but they had to eat, they could not work, but there was no way of feeding them through the public system because they were not registered into the public distribution system, because they were not residents of Delhi, they were migrants. So what did Delhi do? Right? So Delhi created, and many of you might know the story, these temporary e-coupons, which essentially was accessible, downloadable, structured through the phone system, which then also told you not only did you get registered, we also got links to a nearby distribution center, because the city had to actually organize the logistics to make sure that you got the food. Right? But more, so this was one of the major issues that came together, and you can see from this graph that over the period they fed about 1 million people at the peak of the food distribution system, which happened throughout sort of the middle of March structures, definitely through the first lockdown, a little bit through the second lockdown. And there are other ways in which they sort of also use data to put it together. But the point I would like to make to you is this kind of response was possible because the government was thinking data. And because they were thinking data, they did all these kinds of other mappings quite rapidly. So this was working with lots of civil society organizations. So you looked at mapping relief centers to make sure that coverage was good. You looked at mapping ration shops, looked at mapping ration distribution centers. All of these structures, you tried to put something together because you wanted to make sure that coverage was possible. And you use data to try and ensure that they're structured. Now, a number of you would have done most of these similar things as you go forward. So what I would therefore sort of conclude at this point in time, and then basically ask you to reflect and hopefully share as to what is the kind of work that you see yourself doing over vis-a-vis the city, as Professor Mathur said, and what kind do you think there is already a data culture in the cities where you're working? And if not, what can we do to sort of strengthen that culture as we go forward? Thank you.
Thank you. Partho, in your style, you have used data and spoken about what can, what are the numbers saying today, and how, what are the questions people need to be asked. And there are some very thought-provoking questions there. A couple of cities have shown an interest in quickly sharing their story and responding to, some of the comments made here. So maybe we could take the city of Ranchi. Would you like to start with maybe in a quick 2 to 3 minutes max, if you could share what you had to share? And then we will move to the city of Surat.
Purnima, should we start with Surat first?
Patel, are you there? I think he wanted to share the Surat experience. If Jigar is there?
Yes, I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Thank you.
I will quickly just. Are you able to see my screen?
Not yet. Yes, we can now.
Okay.
Yeah, in quickly 2 to 3 minutes. All right.
2 to 3 minutes
And
max. So you are aware that. Yeah, I'll quickly go through the visualization. Yeah. So it's the 8th largest city and the fastest growing city globally, and it's the economic capital of Gujarat. 90% world's diamonds are cut and polished in Surat. Regarding the open data initiative, Surat open data initiative goes back to 2016, where Surat open data portal was launched, and before the smart city open data portal actually came in place. So later on we merged our open data portal with the smart city open data portal, and we discontinued our open data portal. These are some of the claims. So I'll quickly go through. The objectives are very much clear, and the audience is very much aware about the open data initiative objectives which are there. Some of the challenges I want to highlight is the consultation of the data owners, finalization of the data structure for publishing the data sets, regular data availability for all the different domain data sets, which is one of the challenge. Application implemented are in silos, so getting the data from different applications sometimes becomes a challenge for the city or data offices. Different implementing agencies are working in the municipal corporation, so dealing with those agencies sometimes is a challenge. There are dependency on the external agencies for the data extractions also available. So we are now channelizing our all the data initiatives through the Surti ILab, which is the incubation center which we have started under the Smart City mission. So we have also organized a hackathon with the help of NIC plus Computer Society of India Surat chapter, which focuses on the data sets available and to identify and address the different domains where municipal corporation is functioning, like drinking water, sanitation, health, transportation. So these are some of the hackathons which we have organized, and with another Swachhata hackathon we are focusing on health, sanitation, drainage and environment. This is where we can get some idea, we can get the pointers which type of data can be helpful for us to address the civic issues. So these are some of the about the hackathons. Now it is important to have the data available which is more meaningful. So to address that, we need to have the field level data capturing methodologies. So we focus more on the mobile apps for the employees as well as for the citizens, from where we can get the data with the geo-tagged information. So that becomes helpful to for having us the meaningful data for right analysis and right prediction. So under the Smart City Mission India Urban Data Exchange platform also, we are working on the bus occupancy use cases, where the data sets available from the intelligent transit management system and the automatic fare collection system is utilized to identify the bus occupancy available in a real time to the bus which is coming to a bus stop. So this is one initiative we are working on. Apart from that, we are also working on the safety pin initiative under the IUDX initiative, where the mapping of the city will be done regarding safety scores, nearby safety audits, tracking which safe routes are available. So entire city will be audited, and based on that the ranking will be given that which area is much safer in the city. So talking about the COVID initiatives, in month of March only we started implementing our COVID tracking application system, where we ensured that the international travelers and domestic travelers are following the home quarantine, and it was done using the geotagged information which was available. We are also capturing the health status similar to Arogya Setu. Before Arogya Setu started, we started capturing the difficulty in breathing, fever, cough type of symptoms using the mobile app. So we had the geotagged information, and using this geotagged information, each and every uh, person in quarantine, ARI cases, patients with having similar care history were identified. Information from the 2000 hospitals for private clinic doctors were also captured using the systemized approach, and we, based on the data, we were able to identify the cluster formation in the different part of the city to create containment areas. We also did the risk-based analysis based on the population density, based on the census maps available, which area is more dense in terms of population and where we are getting the cases, creating the containment zone, creating buffer zone. Those were also done using the GIS platforms available with us. So we also mapped the ARI cases near to the positive cases, which may be the potential positive case coming in future. So that based on that, we can identify, we can plan our surveillance activities. We can also map our testing vans, which are called Dhanvantari Raths in Gujarat. So that was also done. ARI based mapping was done for the red and yellow zone. ARI clusters were also identified. If there are multiple ARI cases, that is the cough and similar fever type of symptoms having, then if there are any patients where we can see cluster formation, we were able to do our surveillance, and we were able to contain that particular area in advance. So this also represents a GIS-based current COVID situation, where there are multiple things. You say it may seem a cluttered map, but it represents a lot of information. It represents the positive cases in that particular region. It also has the Ithihas analysis, which is the Arogya Setu and the ICMR data, which is used to do a ranking of a specific region in terms of COVID risk. So that is also mapped. Containment area, which are also there in the city, they are also mapped. So on a bird eye view at the municipal commissioner level, they can identify that.
I think we'll
Yeah.
pause here. Surat has been doing some very interesting things on open data, but there is so much content that, each of the cities, we will have a chance sometime later to go in depth on another day. But I think Surat, we've seen Surat's journey and work closely with Jigar also on some of these data stories. So thanks so much, Jigar.
Thank you.
Since I'm in Jamshedpur, I have to be partial and give the Ranchi CDO, Mr. Rajesh Kumar, also a quick opportunity to share what he's been doing. Rajesh, if you can be very brief, yeah, 2 minutes. And I would, if you do not have a PPT, that might be better.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak on this webinar. And I'm thankful to Tata Trust and all the members. So I have been appointed as a city data officer 2 years back by the Ranchi Municipal Corporation. As I am serving Ranchi Municipal Corporation.
Rajesh, is it possible to turn on your video?
Hello.
Yeah, is it possible to turn on your video?
Yeah, ma'am. Yeah.
Yeah, you can just share your experience. There is no need to use a presentation right now. You can quickly share your experience. If it's without the video also, no problem.
Yeah. So I have been appointed as a city data officer in 2018 by the Ranchi Municipal Corporation, as I am serving Ranchi Municipal Corporation as a computer programmer since 2006. So the journey is quite long, which can't be wrapped up in the 5 minutes, but I am keeping these things very short. So I have joined the CDOs, and at that time I thought that it is just like a data sharing program. So ministry will ask the data, and I am only responsible for the providing of the data to the ministry. So that thought comes, first thought which comes in my mind. But after that, when I attended the workshop in Delhi conducted by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, and when I listen to Kunal sir, and when I listen to Rahul sir, so then only I have thought that they are not only to collecting the data, and they have something big in their mind, and they have planned something big, and want to change the face of the working in the government, like what we are doing right now. They want to change, they want to make a data driven governance in entire smart city. So at that time, little bit responsibilities come on my shoulder, and then I have started my journey. Then we have assigned with the task of the 50 data sets. Initially I have thought that these data sets are very much simple, and it's very much easy to grab the data from all the data sources and send it to the ministry. But when we go into that particular exercise, we find that the data set was, that data set which was designed was so scientific that it's not easy to just get the data and fill into the Excel sheet and send it to the ministry. So when we have started our journey, it was tough. It was very tough actually. For the city like Ranchi, it was very tough. For the city where everything was online and all the software and the operations was being done through the online softwares. So for that city, the data collection and creating the data set and the catalog is very much easy. But for the cities in which still the data are still in the files, and they prepare the report manually, for those cities it is very tough to populate all the data sets. Still, in Ranchi, we have only completed 29 data set, and rest of the data we weren't able to achieve from the aligned or armed department. And still we are trying our best to collect all those data so that we can at least fulfill the target of 50 data set. The journey was tough, and lots of hurdles comes in the collection of the data. When we knock anybody for the data collection, either we get all the data or we get no data. Like every department or every department of municipal corporation have some data. So when you ask for the data, they will give you entire data, and they ask you that this is the data which we have. You just find it out whatever the data you require. So we get all the data or we get no data from the department. So we started our journey like that, but still we were able to find some data, relevant data, and we have made the data set and the catalog, and we have published in the open data platform.
Now, Rajesh, if I can just interrupt you for a second, I think
yes,
what you're saying is very, very interesting and relevant. To what extent, when you engage with these departments on data and they say, here is all our data, ab jo chahe le lo, do you get the feeling that they are actually using the data they collect to make their decisions? Or now that you have organizing the data and making it more visible and available, do you get the feeling that the city is actually using this information to somehow affect its own decisions?
No, so while the data collection, they are preparing the data only for the reporting purpose to the government official or to the state government as per the format they have given. Like for the review meeting, whatever the data the department is preparing that time, that is only for the review meetings. They are not for the decision making and like that, and no analysis has been done on basis of that data. Like we have the development department in our organization, but when we reach to them and ask that there is a data set in which we required how many kilometers of road you have developed in last financial year and how many kilometers of drain you have developed in last financial year, they have said we have the data in the files, but we can't add those data to make you prepare your data sets. So that's hurdles we are coming from the departments. And due to the lack of manpower, like when we reach the department, there are only one or two assistants working there, and they are overburdened, so they are least interested in preparing those data. And the data which involve the calculation, they said that we are unable to prepare those data sets.
Right. Sure. Thank you so much.
Then
go ahead, Rajesh, you have another minute.
Yeah, these are about the data set. In short, I will share the journey of the city data policy, which we are still in preparation. Last year, the ministry has asked to prepare the city data policy for the city, but it is a very new thing for the city. For myself, that how we prepare the policy like the city data policy, it's a very new thing, and we are just like we are in a jungle. We don't know anything where we have to go. But with the help of, I think I want to thank to the Raipur state, Raipur and Solapur, who have prepared the city data policy, and the ministry also. At least now we have some framework how we have to think about the city data policy, and I have prepared the city data policy by looking the framework of the Raipur city and the Solapur municipal corporation and the ministry framework, which is already uploaded in the portal. And I have prepared the city data policy, and then I have sent that particular data policy to the ministry, and I have asked the ministry to just vet my policy. And you will glad to know that on Friday they have sent the comments on my city data policy, and they have also suggested some valuable changes, and they have asked that this should be incorporated in your city data policy, and that will be fine.
Thank you so much, Rajesh. I think this thing about the city data policy for the larger group is something which all the cities have, and there are different stages of preparation around this. It's an important part of the data maturity assessment framework, which has been put out by the ministry. And what we do see is that this is a challenge because there isn't those nuts and bolts. What are they, what all needs to be part of the policy, and especially things like data sharing. How do you make this whole story about how does data flow between departments, and what do you even share with the private sector? How do you make information available for open data? Which data set is part of it, but how do you manage data internal to the city? And I think a lot of some of the current assignments which the city data officers are working on as part of the Delta Ace course is around, refining the policy, working together. Cities are working together with each other on an assignment basis to try to put some of these pieces together. So I think it's fairly uphill what the CDOs are trying to do, but I think they're all together in this journey. There's a lot of thinking happening with there's a data analysis unit within the ministry as well, which is working closely with them. But I do think there's a lot to learn from what some of the experts have seen over the years, as what Professor Mathur was sharing, and the kind of experiences Robert has had in Netherlands as well. So I'm going to put together some of the questions which have been coming in parallel to the panel. One being this, and this is more for Professor Mathur. How do you see the CDOs overcoming the challenges for managing analytics around urban sustainability? And convincing authorities to implement stringent action plans. This is, I think, around the point that you were making about what needs to be institutionalized and how to get people to, use the insights that are coming in, whether it's for land reform, whether it's about for building permits, things like that. What kind of, how do you see CDOs working to overcome some of those challenges? For Robert, in your experience of these cities across the world, how have you seen evolved cities beginning to use data as they are maturing, especially around delivery of basic services? Beyond collection, are you seeing the next level of analytics, data use, systems and structures which help some of that? For Anita, one of the questions which has come in, and I think environment seems to be hot for the group here, around carbon neutrality, your scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions. How do you bring in data from industries when the city is trying to, make its move around some of those, about how that data will be stored, how it will be made accessible? And for Partho, you mentioned about, the data culture. Clearly, this kind of an effort is a step, and from what the cities did share. But to your mind, are there some very important tenets that the CDOs also need to be looking at, from a data culture point of view, as they're trying to, play that advocacy and stewardship role within the cities? So maybe we'll start with Professor Mathur. Professor, you're on mute. Professor, you're still on mute.
Yes. No, yeah, it's okay. This is something that we face every day. This is the kind of an issue. And since the question does refer to pollution, climate change, those of you who have been watching what goes on in Delhi these days, now the stubble burning is stopped, but the pollution levels are at the same level. And the piece of information on which action is to be taken, we just don't know what that information is. But the larger question, how do we convince them, overcoming those challenges of urban sustainability? The real issue is that we have not been able to convince that what we do makes meaning. And let me give you two examples. We were in South Korea several years ago, and we were in the control room from where they monitor the transport system in the whole town. There are 12 monitors, and you can see from the control room the entire city and how the traffic is moving forward. Now, there were several missions from the government of India as well that we should bring in that kind of a control room to India as well. The trouble was that in Seoul, almost 99.9% of traffic was vehicular traffic. To deal with a city like Delhi, where the traffic itself is not just vehicular traffic, but all kinds of traffic, which also is bullock cart, which is the longer driven, there are the bicycles, now they have not been able to decide what kind of a response should there be. So what are when the question is raised, what do we convince them for? We still do not know where the answer lies. And therefore the question becomes where it is. The question remains unanswered. Let me also give you another example of simply looking at data and trying to take a decision, and where we fail. A common story in India has been that we have a huge demographic dividend, and therefore the country is in a very advantageous position to move forward. You begin to break down the word demographic dividend 15 to 24 and look at what the position is with respect to all the states and union territories, and they will come across a remarkable finding which shows that the demographic dividend is only in those states which are low urbanized, which are low income, and which are least developed. The demographic dividend is very, very high in those states. And what is the problem in states such as Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Kerala? That there's a problem of aging coming in. Now, to club all of India as part of the demographic dividend and putting in some kind of a policy gives almost a break there that nothing is going to happen anyway. So the question that is being raised is that we are still not clear what the answers are, what kind of data supports that question, and therefore we just don't make any move forward. So it goes back to the question that let's have a clear data set in order to understand what the question and what the answer is. That is all I will say, Purnima, in response to this one. This is certainly a difficult question. How do we convince them and so on and so forth? On the urban sustainability, you were, since the word has been used here, you remember the work that we did. And almost every data that we had pointed to localization of SDG 11. And that was the key point that we raised in the seminar, that you could not come. Purnima, you could not make it. But that was the last that we heard of localization. After that, the debate on localization is over. No debate. So the question of how do we take it forward at the level of the city remains stuck, because we still have not formulated the data sets required to monitor SDG 11 at the level of cities. That is all that I will say. So a lot of work is there, a lot of work.
Sure. No, a lot of work to put together the data, and I also think that post that COVID, I think took over the rural and urban,
possibly, yes.
Making space entirely. And I think the traction that we saw on localization, especially in the latter part of last year, that I think it's going to take time, and now it will be more uphill when everybody comes back to that conversation. But I do think that there needs to be a lot of realization that had that kind of granular information been available, a lot of planning and response times would have been so much better, particularly about on migration, on skilling, where are people, where are they moving. The dearth of that information, I think, has hurt us very, very hard. Robert, would you like to come in and share what's been, what you've been seeing? Have you seen some of the cities there be able to use data better in these COVID times? Those who are a little ahead of the curve. How do you see more mature, or how do you see that maturity progression happen in the cities you've worked with?
Yes, well, let me answer that question in two ways. One is, of course, we have the bigger Dutch cities like Amsterdam, Rotterdam, and The Hague, who have been among the first to install the chief data officers within their organizations, and they have been progressing over the last years from being sort of like isolated positions to start with, because the whole organization was looking at them. Why in the world would we now all of a sudden need a chief data officer? What is this chief data officer going to do? This developed and grew into being a central position within the city administration to not only be able to use to combine all the different data sets within the city in order to create one data-driven input for policy making. So they have been progressing into formalizing, but also in an informal way, creating a position within the city to actually produce and use the data as a data-driven input for policy making. And they have been sharing their experiences amongst each other. And this is an important point that I want to make. They have been sharing their experiences, because the way it went in Amsterdam was different from the way it went in The Hague and the way it went in Rotterdam. And they have sort of like organized a peer reviewing kind of committee in which the major cities in the Netherlands were sharing their experiences with the implementation of the position of the chief data officer. Also, they have been reaching out to the Dutch Association of Municipalities in order to also exchange their experiences also with this association, and through the association also bringing the experiences to the other cities in the Netherlands who have not yet been involved in creating the position of the chief data officer, or the smaller cities who are still struggling in a way with using data in the policymaking context. So that's one movement from the bigger cities, from the institutionalization of the chief data officers into sharing their experiences amongst each other and sharing the experiences also with other municipalities. Apart from that, but also partly linked to that, because CBS Statistics Netherlands has urban data centers with all those major cities. We have also involved what we call the urban data center community. We have by now we have like almost 24 of those urban data centers all over the country, and we have created an urban data center community who, especially in COVID, well, before COVID, they would meet physically on a location somewhere in the Netherlands, but now since COVID, they are organizing a monthly urban data center community, sort of like a webinar in which they exchange all their experiences, and there we also include the chief data officers of the bigger cities, and we also include the Dutch Association of Municipalities. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to use the experiences of the front runners in this data revolution, so to say, to share their experiences with the followers, the smaller cities, the cities who have less budget and are less innovative, in order to also bring them along in this process of gradually having all our cities in the Netherlands using data in a data-driven policy context.
Thank you. Great. And growing from there, I think Anita would you share a little bit about how bringing us together in Pune, how that maybe with the Pune example, or generally how you see access to industry data, which is what I think that question or the query was more around, how to access some of the industry data sets with respect to environment, but even otherwise. You are on mute.
Yeah, okay, so I'm not clear about the context. There was a word mentioned, carbon neutrality, because the way I see is there are two possibilities why somebody is trying to gather data from the industry. One could be the climate assessment. I mean, especially CDOs trying to gather. So one would be the climate assessment, which the smart cities are doing, for which you would need possibly some of the emission data from the industries. And the second could be really trying to plan for carbon neutrality for the region. So in both cases, I think you have to rely, especially for the industry, you have to rely on the pollution control boards, which are there in every state. There is a central pollution control board, and if you take Maharashtra, there is Maharashtra Pollution Control Board. Similarly, there are there in every state. So they do have the data, and in fact, what will be required is enablement for them to share data for the purpose for which it is required. So enablement will have to be provided, say, by the municipal commissioner or the smart city CEO, and then this party would have to be approached to actually get the data.
Okay. Also, you would ask some, is my getting shared for some reason?
You're fine. We just have you on video. That seems just about right.
Yeah, all right.
Yes, and actually I was just curious also to ask Anita whether she feels that there is generally within industry, there is a willingness to share these kinds of data and sort of to engage in this effort to commonly become carbon neutral. And perhaps we could return to that in a second. But just to quickly answer the question that came up, my own sense, and Robert, of course, has laid out some of that stuff earlier. In terms of building a data culture, my own sense would be to address what Rajesh outlined, which is for the data officer to engage with the department which has the data, to basically ask one question. How can we help you take your decisions better? You'll have to engage with not so much the external audience, but the internal audience. And that internal audience to try and ensure कि भाई अगर आपको मैं किस तरह से मदद कर सकता हूं. That is the core issue that you need to sort of build that constituency. And once that is built, then I'm sure a variety of structures will come through, and I'm sure Anita has that experience in Pune herself, and there may be many that she can share. But that's my fundamental sort of one-line response to that question. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, in fact, this data culture story is something that we are also trying to do within the trust at an organizational level. And these are some of the conversations we're also having, that, what can information do for people is the important pointer. Otherwise, framework, structures, API, those are all to the end, which is that, how are you going to, what kind of decisions can, it facilitate? How can you use it for planning? And it's very easy and often that people get very caught up in the mechanics of which information set to upload, how to do it and things like that, which are of course important parts of the puzzle. but the tough and the bigger questions about problem solving are where a lot of these do seem to get stuck. One last round of open thoughts by the panelists as we've been talking about this, as you've been hearing each other, and you've been hearing the cities also share what they've been up to. Clearly, a lot of the cities in India have been making, taking steps about what they can do with their own information. A lot of information has been coming in through the integrated command and control centers, which is of different data types. From there's now visual information, GPS information, video camera, air pollution, and of course the standard data set. So any parting thoughts from each of you, and in response to each other or what you've heard, or the larger questions that you think are important for stakeholders today. So open last 10 minutes. Professor Mathur, do you want to go first? You have something you're really wanting to share.
I would love to see any city sort of sharing data on this open platform. What new data has been collected as in response to the smart city requirement? Any city. I mean, that would really help us to understand what is being collected and in what way it is going to be used. Right now, we just have a hearsay. We have not seen the data per se. We only have heard people saying that we have collected this data. In what way that is being woven to present an overall story about about any city, that this is how we intend to make our city smart. These are the 10 things, the data-based 10 things that we have done that will help us to move in that direction. If we get to see that one, that would certainly help us in understanding the data culture, in what way it is being embedded in the day-to-day sort of ethos of a municipal corporation. That would be my last comment.
You can go in any order. So Anita, I think you also wanted to say something.
Yeah, I would just like to sum up with just a couple of points for the CDOs. And this is in the context of moving towards, data-driven decision systems, especially based on open data. That's what we are talking about. So I'd like to highlight two things here. One thing is, in order to find a solution to some of the problems, like be it traffic congestion or be it, like a mobility solution, you require what I would call as solutioning ability, which is quite different from understanding the data set. So in our industry, we have words like solution architects, so who can actually find a solution. So my point is that this ability is required. Don't expect this to lie within the municipal corporation or within a government setup. That's none of their business. This will lie in research and development institutes. This will lie in research and development arms of industries. So you need to leverage that, which means you have to build and nurture partnerships. So this is one important thing I wanted to tell. And the second thing is that you will need to lead from the front, because each of these people will understand only one part. When you talk of a partnership, that person brings in only one type of capability. So a CDO will have to actually help stitch the story across the multiple participating agencies. On one side, you have the HOD or the municipal commissioner or whoever it is who is the recipient. And on the other side, you have these experts or data gurus and what I call as solution architects. And you have to get them together, but you will have to lead from the front to get them to collaborate and craft a solution approach and then work together. These are my two things.
Great. Who's next?
If you can quickly, maybe Robert can jump in. But one of the things I would like to sort of quickly flag is, as you mentioned, COVID has sort of dominated thinking in our cities in the last 9 months. But as we saw from Surat, it has also sort of got a lot of people to think about using data in a particular way. And I would be very, and it may be useful as you go through the Delta Ace course and you start engaging with each other to see how is the COVID experience something that can be leveraged to create this data culture that one is talking about. Did the experience of COVID actually help convince decision makers in the city that it is useful to sort of use data in a particular way? And you know, that's a conversation that perhaps I'm sure there's a lot of variation in your city as to how this would actually be used, and be useful to perhaps have frank conversations internally across your own city data office to see how these kinds of responses came through. Because in some senses, one of the big benefits I see of this particular program is to create this network of 100 city data officers, people who can rely upon each other, chat with each other, engage notes with each other, said, I'm in this kind of trouble, what can I do? Ye jhanjat mein kaise sambhalu? That kind of story, and that I think would be a really useful resource, this kind of support group going forward. I hope we get formed as a result of these kinds of things. I think Robert was talking about those kinds of support groups when he talked about people meeting together from time to time.
Yes, maybe I can give a short response to that. I think what COVID has learned us in the Netherlands is that sometimes a negative external impulse leads to a growing awareness of the necessity of using good data. And that's just one sentence that sort of like summarizes it all, I would say, is because we pre-COVID, of course, you know, we have been talking about necessity of using data, and everybody's convinced and says yes, and then maybe the next day they go to their daily business and they don't realize the urgency of that remark. But COVID really in the Netherlands learned us that, and again, as a result of a negative impulse, that it's very important to have good data, not only on the COVID situation, on how to fight COVID in the Netherlands, but then from that also to other topics. So I think also we, even though we would have probably never expected that, some kind of external negative impulse or external threat, or how to call it, sort of like spurred and fueled the discussion on the necessity of using good data as an input for governance policy making.
Thank you so much, Robert. In fact, to loop in what both Robert and Professor were saying, this course on enabling making using data, we had a lot of content ready actually last year, but the galvanizing of the conversations within the ministry, making sure the batch was ready and getting it rolled out. I think this realization that data is very important, and people at the front end who are handling those, who are manning the fort, needs to be completely fortified with all the tools and techniques. I think that happened in these last months. A great time that we've been able to spend with the various cities, and we're looking forward to that. So we're also learning about what the cities are doing, what is top of their mind, how each of them are navigating this data story and building a data culture within their municipal institutions. So thank you so much to all the CDOs with us today. Thank you for the larger urban community who has joined us, and definitely to our four panelists, Professor Mathur, Robert Hermans, Professor Partha Mukhopadhyay, and Anita Kane for making this such a vibrant and discussion. Thanks, everyone.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. The CDOs look forward to that community.